Good evening and welcome. I'm Kelli Richards, CEO of the All Access Group and the host of All Access Radio. I've spent over 20 years creating innovative alliances in the digital media industry and driving the convergence of music, entertainment, and technology between major content companies, technology companies, and established musicians and celebrities. Tonight's guest on our show is Tom Silverman. Tom is the founder of Tommy Boy Entertainment and has served as its CEO since 1981. He's also the co-founder of the independent film and television company Tommy Boy Films, and he has over 30 years' experience in the hip-hop, urban, rock, and other music segments. Tom was also the vice president of Warner Brothers Records from 1985 to 2002, while Tommy Boy was a subsidiary of that company. He also founded the Dance Music Report in 1978, which was the preeminent newsletter for DJs for over 15 years. He's a founder of the legendary New Music Seminar, which is the world's seminal music industry convention. It was through the 80s, and it's back now. And he's the co-executive director of the recently revived New Music Seminar. Tom serves on the board of RIAA, the Sound Exchange, American Association of Independent Music, and many other notable organizations, including NAR Manufacturers Advisory Board. There's sure a lot more to say, but let's hear it from Tom directly. So welcome to the show, Tom.
Hi, Kelly. How are you?
Good to have you back. You know, Tom, you're a definite believer that the decade of adjustments in the music business is over, and the next 10 years will probably be the most exciting the industry's ever seen. Could you expand on that for a few minutes?
Sure. I've been watching it carefully. The only reason I started the New Music Seminar again a few years back was because it seemed clear to me that the record business, as we knew it, was over, and it was never coming back, and yet nobody was talking about what is going to replace what was the record business.
Right.
So I thought that we should create a forum to invite the visionaries and leaders of the new think to get together and discuss what they felt would be replacing the record business, because musicians will keep making music and it will still do something, but we don't know what. And we saw the business drop 60% in 10 years, and when you add inflation to that, the value of the music business today is very close to what it was in 1966.
Yep. So, and I come out of the label world as well originally, as you know, and I have been at the forefront of the digital music revolution now for close to 20 years. We predicted the fall of what has happened, but we never expected that the non-music revenues would actually replace record companies. In other words, we never expected a dollar-for-dollar replacement. There are plenty of new revenue streams that we both are well aware of, and we'll get into some of that now. But I just want to clarify, personally, I don't believe that we're replacing lost revenues dollar for dollar per se. But we'll talk about that. Frankly,
I wouldn't be happy if we did, because my vision is to see a music business that's 4 times bigger than
I was just going to say the same thing. I think we can grow it a lot bigger than what it was. But it isn't going to be, you know, for years people wrung their hands, label execs wrung their hands and said, what are we going to do to replace the lost income? And from a record label standpoint, I don't see that happening. From a music industry standpoint, I see it as never having been healthier. So let's talk. Like I was just starting to say, we both embrace this notion of non-sales revenue opportunities, and that is the way that we're going to get to the $100 billion music industry over the next 10 years. I'd love to hear what your thoughts are about some of the most important non-sales opportunities that the industry should be embracing.
Well, I think before you even get into that, you have to take a look at where we are and how we've changed. I think last year, the music business bottomed out and started to turn around, or at least it flattened out and stopped falling in general in revenues. If you look at record sales, it didn't, but if you look at overall revenues, it started to turn around slightly. Albums this year to date are down almost 8%. CDs are down 19%, but digital albums are up 9%. So combined downward movement of album purchases of almost 8%. Tracks are down. Digital tracks are down 2% for the first time. They haven't been up since the advent of the digital single in 2003 or 4. So that's a concern for people who are looking for unit sales to come back. My point is, and yours too, that they're not going to come back. The ironic thing is, in the music business, if you look at it, even this year to date, more than 50% of all album sales are still physical CDs. So 53.5% of all physical sales this year
Shocking.
so far are.
I'm sorry, Tommy. That is so shocking for me to hear. That kind of, you've got the stats at your fingertips, but I still can't believe that CDs are still that much of the business.
Well, I mean, in places like Japan, they're 95% still. And in Europe, they're 70%, they're 80%. In certain genres like country, they're much higher. They're like 75% still.
Yeah.
But there are other revenue sources. There's 5 other revenue sources, or at least 4, that you can identify that aren't tied to units. One of them is performance revenue, which is Sound Exchange, a new revenue center in the last 10 years where Sound Exchange, which I'm also on the board on, collects from all of the digital broadcasters, Sirius XM and Pandora, iHeartRadio, and all the webcasters. And last year they collected $500 million and distributed it to artists and labels directly. And the amount that was distributed to labels was the equivalent of probably almost a third of their profit last year.
Wow.
And because it's money that goes right to their bottom line. They pay the artists directly and they pay the labels directly, and that money goes right to their bottom line. There's no mechanicals, there's no deductions, there's no manufacturing. That cost is just new revenue that goes right to the bottom line. So It's different than top-line revenue. The other area is subscription revenue, which is Spotify and things like that, Rhapsody and Cricket Move and Xbox, Microsoft, and many other places, Mog, and there are many other subscription models, Slacker. All together, they're equaling 3 or 4 million subscribers, and that number is growing quickly. I'd say that each of those is equivalent to 5% in gross revenues. And then the old one is sync revenue, when you license music for TV, film, or advertising, and that there's more uses of TV, film, and advertising than ever before. So because people are more involved with music than ever before, despite the fact the music business hasn't monetized. And then you have rev share income, YouTube and Vivo and other places that share revenues on a licensed basis with labels, and then labels share that with artists. And that's about growing to be another 5%. So that's around 25% of total revenue on the top line.
Where do concerts come in? Concert revenue.
Concerts, well, labels, the people that invest in music don't participate in concert revenue. So there's publishing revenue, there's concert revenue, there's merchandising revenue. Those are 3 separate silos. And unless a label has a 360 deal, they don't participate in those revenue centers directly. They come from other revenue centers. But the venture capitalist that drives the whole force is the record label. They're the ones who invest in the artist, that take the risk, that sign the artist, to help with the A&R. They do the distribution, and they promote the music, and they take a big risk every time they swing the bat. It costs them $500,000, $250,000 to $1 million, and they're wrong 9 times out of 10. So it's like any venture capital business. For that model to work, there has to be a huge payoff.
That's correct.
And there's no longer a huge payoff. One hit no longer pays for 9 stiffs. It doesn't even pay for 2 stiffs.
And since there's no such thing as artist development anymore, even the one doesn't have a chance.
Well, for there to be artist development, there would have to be a big return on investment, because artist development means you stick with an artist for a long period of time, and it means that if you're wrong after 2 years or 3 years, your losses have piled up even more. So the label's patience, their ability to take risks has declined, and so that's why they're signing less artists. A lawyer for one of the bigger labels told me recently that their roster is 90% smaller than it was 10 years ago.
That's right.
That means they have 10% as many artists signed as they used to have.
Exactly right. And
so these are things.
They released a lot of the others that they had on the roster for the same reasons.
They released them, and they're not signing as many because there's fear. And one of the problems is there's probably a lot of great artists that would go on to sell millions or, make millions, let's say, if they could be signed. But no one's going to take a chance on something that doesn't sound like it's right in the pocket for what radio is playing today or whatever, because it's just too risky right now, and the return doesn't justify the risk. So either people have to risk less or they have to get a bigger return. And that's why people tried that 360 deal thing for a while.
Exactly. We're talking about labels, Tom, in this part of the conversation. I've spent the last 17 years of my career focusing on non-sales revenue opportunities, found money for artists. And, of course, I know Sound Exchange does a lot of that, too. But I'm not so concerned about what happens to the labels. I'm concerned about the artist.
Well, who's going to invest in the artist then?
Well,
that situation, the artists you were collecting on were already established, and they were established because of an investment by an artist, by a venture capitalist, which was the label. And who's going to replace that?
I don't dispute that. One of the replacements is certainly brand sponsors, some of whom have started their own labels. And we're seeing artists embracing those kind of relationships more now. So that's certainly a spoke on the wheel that artists should not overlook.
There's not been one that's worked. One of my old artists, De La Soul, put their last album out on, I think Nike released the album, and it sold 10,000 copies,
right.
Which for De La Soul is pretty disappointing. It's basically a non-event because they're not in the business.
Well,
Pepsi
do you agree that
sound.
Essentially the days of gold and platinum diamond-type sales are over under anybody's distribution?
Yeah, I'm not concerned with that. I'm talking about success or failure. I mean, for De La Soul to do 10,000, regardless of whatever, is a failure. And for the Green Label Sound, they had some sexy artists that they signed there, but none of them have been successful. Forget about unit sales as a base of success. Under any basis of success, those are artists that had a buzz, but they could not convert them because they don't have the skills their record labels have had. So somebody has to invest that has skills. You may not care about labels, but artists care about them, and they should care about them, because when I started the New Music Seminar, it was my belief, like yours, that we could do it yourself. We could put all these technological tools together, and artists should be able to break on their own. That's what they said when they talked about the long tail, when Chris Anderson wrote that book and that blog originally, and it turned out that wasn't really true.
Well, I am definitely way more concerned about artists. I still believe there is room for labels because they do have certain expertise. I just think that the whole label strategy, if an artist is going to work with a label, needs to be more on their terms. It needs to be more equitable. And I don't know that we'll ever see the kind of label days that we both went through in our careers. I don't see that coming back the way it was. So I do,
but I see it coming back on a non-unit basis, and I see labels for the first time, only in the last 9 months, embracing this concept of a world without units, but huge revenues.
Right.
And only labels can deliver it, by the way. Only labels have enough collective clout to go negotiate deals with YouTube and Google and Verizon and AT&T eventually, and every internet service provider and mobile service provider in the world.
Well,
that's what it's going to take.
But they've been fighting all of the things we've been working on for the last 12 years. You're saying you now believe that the mindset has shifted, that they must embrace technology and digital in order to survive and thrive. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I think that they're seeing models. I mean, at first they were opposed to Spotify. Now they love it. They think it's a great model. They think where it's at is really where they want to see more of. They like to see music be embedded in every connected device, from televisions to refrigerators, but certainly most important, cell phones.
So now we've talked about a little bit about subscription revenues being one of the key drivers as a growth area. And one membership-based company has already achieved 23 million in paid subscribers in North America alone. What effect?
Actually, 24 and just in America, not including Canada.
And what effect do you think this will have, Tommy, on total music sales revenue if subscriptions are bundled to smartphones and tablets?
The people in the audience all have cable subscriptions, and they pay somewhere between $60 and $150 a month. How many of the stations that you get do you watch? Probably 5%, 10% at the most, if that.
Right.
Meanwhile, you're subsidizing all of the ones that you don't watch, okay? So most of them are subsidizing sports, and if you're not into sports, you're not getting really what you pay for, because part of the reason why cable is so expensive is because the sports teams are demanding that. Now, I'm going to backtrack for 1 second, because here's a factor that somebody said just last October, and I never heard it before. If you look at the music business, people are engaged with music roughly 14 hours a week. they're involved with music, listening to music, and engaged with music. The music business, including touring, merch, all the silos, publishing, and music sales and everything else, is a $70 billion business worldwide.
Mm-hmm.
People spend about 3.5 hours a week engaged with sports. Sports is a $441 billion business, okay? If you could monetize music, at the engagement with music, the attention that music creates, the same way sports is able to do it, music would be a $1.6 trillion business.
Now you're bookending a comment that I hear consistently from a venture capitalist colleague of mine out here on the West Coast named Jeeni of Golden Gate Ventures.
Yeah, he's the one who said it. You got it.
You got it from him. Okay. It's a boomerang because that's his platform, and he's right. It really shakes people up. You have to stop and think about it. So I'm in alignment with both on that.
And I think, I don't know that 1.6 trillion is realistic, but the music business without touring and all the other things is 23 billion worldwide at retail, about 60% of that at wholesale. So I see those numbers quadrupling in the next decade based on monetizing passives. Okay, when you're a passive TV watcher when you watch cable TV because you don't watch every channel.
Right.
You can't. Nobody can. I mean, 75% of the channels, I don't care if I have or not, but they're with the package, and every one of those channels, most of them at least, get paid $1 or $2 or $5 or $10 of whatever it is that I pay every month in my cable bill. Now, what if every phone in the world, and there's 6 billion activated cell phones in the world, what if every phone included music, not as an opt-in experience, but it came with the phone, and that phone service provider would include a $1 a month charge that would be paid to the labels to distribute to the artist or whatever per month? That would mean we would be a $100 billion business just by that alone.
Exactly.
Within 1 year. And nobody would notice the difference. And in Africa, the number might be 50 cents, and in the United States, it might be $3 a month. But no one's really paying it. It's just in your bill. Like, I don't see in my bill what I'm paying for the History Channel or what I'm paying for Bravo. But believe me,
once again,
each one of them gets paid.
I go back to another shared colleague, I think, of both of ours, Mark Geiger, of William Morris Endeavor, very, very sharp digital pioneer as well. And he was espousing doing this very thing, tying music subscription to cell phones 17 years ago. Why do you think it's taking so long for something like this to happen?
Well, I think the music business was so busy fighting piracy, and they believed that if they stopped piracy, the record business would come back. The reality is, piracy has nothing to do with the fall of the record business. We've seen studies that show that the most active people who don't get music from BitTorrent are also spending a lot of money with music and on concerts and everything else. They're the most active consumers and biggest music aficionados. I think we're in an early stage of technology, and mainly we're in the middle of a paradigm shift, and it took a while before everyone the people at the top of the label stopped being defensive and started saying, how can we grow this pie? But the real thing is, there's only 300 million music buyers in the world who buy units of music ever out of 7 billion people. So if we can activate the 5 billion people that don't buy music and never bought music all around the world, even at a much smaller level than we're activating the 300 million that do buy music, we're going to see huge growth.
Certainly true.
And that's part of it. So that's the easiest way to get to 100 billion, but it's not the only way. There are many, many other areas of growth possible in the business. The licensing quagmire between publishing and record companies is just such a nightmare for anybody that wants to legitimately license music that we're leaving hundreds of millions, if not billions and billions of dollars on the table there worldwide. The Uber consumer, the person who loves a band, I saw numbers just in the last few weeks where they would spend up to $1,000 a year on the band that they like.
It's so true.
And all we do is sell them something that's $12 or $10 or $9.99.
Talk about leaving money on the table.
Yeah,
and they'd be happy to pay it for all the right reasons.
Right. So, but we create for the lowest common denominator.
I know
we
it.
create
I know
one
it.
to fit all.
You know,
So
Tommy, this is an
things
aside. I wonder, have you thought about publishing a book, an e-book on this topic, or a white paper or something? You're so knowledgeable.
Just the target is moving so fast. I agree with Ray Kurzweil when he talks about, the acceleration of knowledge. And you can really feel this knowledge is accelerating so quick that something you hear in 1 week, by the time you could sort of manifest something physical around it, it's shifted already. It's very, very hard to keep up. I mean, you and I keep up with every new technology, and it's a full-time job just to keep up with it.
I published a book on social media in the music industry 18 months ago, and it's now time for us to update it. We're coming out with a second edition. It's for all the same reasons,
It's almost like it becomes a magazine. You've got
so many great insights here that I wish we could, we could tap all of it and everybody could have access to it. But that segues into the new music seminar.
That's one of the reasons we started the New Music Seminar, and we do it every year because every year the game shifts and we have to make a different kind of a statement.
That's right.
And the future changes, and and it makes you realize we're creating the future. And right now, in the present moment, every day, by our beliefs and our decisions. So if I start the New Music Seminar, and we all changed our belief to say, you know what, the music business is coming back. It's going to be 4 times bigger in 10 years, double in 5 years, and we're going to accelerate that growth. You know what? It's going to happen. And it starts with a belief.
I agree. And the next one, of course, is coming up in New York City, June 9th through 11th this year. Of course, this is the New Music Seminar is a leading space for visionaries and disruptors alike who are building a new music industry. How do you see these architects of a sustainable new music business providing digital solutions to help labels and artists down the road?
Well, every year it gets better with the seminar because as I discover that the labels are no longer fighting, and now they're saying, okay, this is the business, let's embrace it. Mm-hmm. They're much more open. The New Music Seminar is the only conference that gets the CEOs, not only of the technologies, but also of the labels to attend. It's also the only conference that deals with music technology, that deals with it from the music perspective as opposed to from the technologist perspective. Mm-hmm. How can we make technology work for music and musicians and creators as opposed to how do we create another business that we could flip for, $100 million in 3 years?
Right.
It's building a sustainable music business. That's our goal, not, coming up with the next business we can flip. Not that there's anything wrong with that, and those companies will come to the New Music Seminar, and we'll have the chairman of almost all of them. The chairman of Spotify came and spoke before he launched Spotify, and I'm sure Daisy Beats will be there this year, and all of the new technologies that are announcing now. There's a bunch of new ones that between now and June will be launching. They'll all be there, and YouTube and others that are really changing the game in so many ways because there's success stories and new success stories every year that we need to cover and bring the people who created this success together to talk about them and how do we plug into them as artists and managers and as labels, and how do we really expose music in new ways and monetize it in new ways. That's really the story, and even create it in new ways.
That's right.
So we break the business into 3 sections: creation, exposure, and monetization.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
We don't focus based on genre because we think it doesn't matter if you're into country, hip hop, or classical. You still have to create, expose, and monetize.
Sure. And for those attending this year's event, Tommy, who are some of the keynotes and top leaders that our participants are going to learn from this year?
Well, we're not making that announcement yet. We haven't made the announcement yet, but we have some great ones lined up already, and more coming all the time. And we're getting buy-in from the entire industry, from the independent community, the major label community first, which is really important, and then the managers and the booking agents and the publishers are all coming in as well. This year, the New Music Seminar falls on the same week as the Songwriters Hall of Fame, and just a few days after, a conference that only comes to America every 4 years called the World Creators Summit that's in Washington, D.C., that brings creators from around the world together in Washington and then 2 years later in Brussels, which is the European capital, to talk about the value of creation, what creators put out there. It's something that people who exploit that creative call content, but we like to call it art or creative output, because to the person who creates something, it doesn't feel like content. Content is the kind of thing that you fill a warehouse with or fill a pipe with.
Yeah.
It's not the kind. Music is not content to me.
No, that's doing it a disservice, I think. I agree with you. So it ought to be another exciting show anyway, and we encourage all of our listeners to consider attending the New Music Seminar. I've gone a couple of times myself. I've spoken, and it's just a wonderful, wonderful conference that Tom and Dave put together.
And this year we're putting more music involved in it, so there'll be music at the conference and every night, and we're going to have very focused showcases. I just came back from South by Southwest, and it's such a huge show that there's so much going on. And in a way, it's really frustrating because there's so much I'd like to do, and it's here and it's there and it's everywhere, and you go from one to the other, and I'm running all the time. It's really hard to get into it.
Right.
The seminar is the size that you could really appreciate things. You could really sit with music and get into it and not feel like you're missing a million other things that are happening. I left the South by Southwest more frustrated than before I arrived because there's so much I wanted to do.
Yeah, I got to be honest. I didn't go this year, and that was the reason, because I felt like it was just become a sea of chaos, and I get frustrated easily by that. But, that's why I love the New Music Seminar. It's much more manageable. Now, Tommy, the last time we talked, you gave us your views on the Hall of Fame controversy around the nomination process and the voting system. Has anything changed since? That was 2 years ago. Will we see more urban music brought into the fold? Do you think we're standing on the rock and roll part of the brand too much?
No, it really depends who the voters are, and the voters tend to be the old rock elite. They're not really changing the voting block, so you can see who got nominated and then who won this year. The nominations usually have, a bunch of hip-hop artists and some interesting urban artists, and then the final winners usually there aren't any, or there might be one, but it's sort of, a crossover mainstream kind of very old artist that might be accepted. And there's a lot of politicking that goes on.
Oh, yeah. That we
know. It's a political thing.
That we know. There are so many worthy artists who haven't been in.
It's a great institution.
Yeah.
Tons.
I mean, it's a frustrating conversation. We'll probably move on from that. Could you share, Tommy, any of the current projects that you're working on with Tommy Boy Entertainment and those penciled for the near future?
Yeah. We have some great stuff that we're working on right now. In fact, we have the number one club record this week with Chris Cox featuring DJ Frankie and Crystal Waters called Oh Mama Hey. That's number one this week.
Congratulations.
In the clubs. Thanks. And then we have a 21-year-old Canadian singer called Guinevere has a track called Fly Away. It's sort of a top 40 song that's going to be coming out in the middle of April. It's the first one we're putting out. It's her second single, but that's something that we're pretty excited about. And then we've got this girl who's actually from Zimbabwe, but she lives in Scotland. Her name's Gamu, and she came out of the X Factor in the UK back in 2010.
Wow.
But she didn't make it to the last rounds, but she's got a great song called Shake the Room that we think is going to be something big. And then we have a reggae artist from very interesting from the European reggae scene. He's from Portugal. He's a Portuguese reggae artist, but he speaks English with a Jamaican patois. If you hear him speaking, you'd think he was from Jamaica. This guy is unbelievable. And he's got a great song called That's How We Roll that was elected the Song of the Year last year in Portugal.
Wow.
So and
all
the album was a top 10
all
reggae
kinds of good
album,
stuff.
So we're excited.
You brought
and then
up
we have a bunch
X
of
Factor.
EDM.
You brought up X Factor, and I wonder what your thoughts are. When millions of people are sitting at home watching the top 10 of X Factor or Idol or any of these shows, The Voice, is that a feeder for labels to consider signing? It must be for all the people that weren't the winner.
Well, we've had a runner-up before, Blake Lewis, and we had a lot of problems. There is a big backlash and a sentiment against artists that participate in the TV shows, not just here, but around the world we're finding. And, it's because what works on television isn't necessarily that works in the real world of music and stuff. So, we didn't look at her because of X Factor. We just heard the song and we said, this is a great song, let's sign it.
Right. But I just wanted to get your
views we went
on,
into it blind.
On that.
Yeah, but she's in England, she's breaking, and she's getting a lot of press because everyone knows who she is. There was some controversy around her. She got kicked off the show in one of the judges' living rooms before it moved into television, and there was a big outcry against it. I don't know anything about it. She's 21 years old. She's interesting looking, and she's got a great sound to her, and I think the song is great, and if it can connect. I'm very excited about music now, and Tommy Boy, we're taking more shots now. We're trying to get past that fear thing and really find hits.
Yep, that's what it's always been about.
I think there's a lot of hits out there that are never getting a chance to expose themselves and rise to the top.
Yeah.
When I started in 1981, it was just me and 2 other employees, and we had no money, and we didn't know what we were doing, and there was no internet yet, and no computers even, or cell phones, and we just put a few records out, and we connected within the first year with the record, and it felt like magic. And that's what I love about the music business. When you find one that's real, some greater force just takes over, and you ride it like a wave, and it's so great.
Yeah,
so that's what I want to do.
Totally agree. That's why I went into A&R, and that was the whole job, and I still have a lot of that in my bones. And in fact, there are 2 artists I wanted to mention to you, Tommy, that if I didn't when we were in New York together, that I would love for you to just check out on YouTube when you can. One's called Vintage Trouble, and the other is called Blush. And I think these are both amazingly great groups that I hope will take off. So those are the 2 I'm excited about right now.
I will definitely check it out. I ask everybody now what they like. I mean, we have a new kind of a contract to Tommy Boy.
Yeah, when you search on YouTube for Blush, make sure you type in Blush Band, because blush is such a common word. And then look at Vintage Trouble. I think you're really going to get a kick out of these guys. And speaking of YouTube, before we start to wind our time together down, I wanted to bring them up. YouTube and Vevo are certainly beginning to generate significant revenues to the music business, and they're driving discovery as well. So I wonder how important you feel both spaces are in contributing to the resurrection of the business.
Well, Vevo and YouTube people watch Vevo mostly through YouTube so far, so it's all about YouTube and the way it works. Vevo is the way that we monetize, and we're able to drive the CPMs up, so the revenues are stronger because of Vevo. But YouTube's revenues are stronger too. They used to start at around $2 CPM, cost per thousand, in terms of what they could get from advertising, and very little advertising. Now they're up over 20, and they're getting tons of advertising. So, and it's just getting started. In the next 3 years, you'll see that double or triple again, both CPM and the number of ads that they run through there. So it's a big area of growth for the music business. We're going to probably see at least 3 or 4 more years of rapid growth in that area.
Yeah.
I'm very excited about. But the idea about an artist like Psy from Korea breaking all around the world. I was just about to bring him up,
yeah.
Couldn't have happened, 10 years ago. And, you see the Academy Award winner for Best Documentary, Searching for Sugarman, and you think about that guy, Sixto Rodriguez from Detroit, and that could never have happened now. How could a guy sell 500,000 albums in South Africa, and he didn't even know about it in Detroit, and it didn't break anywhere else in the world?
Right.
Today, it would break everywhere.
Yep, so that's what's possible with something like this. This is what technology enables.
Great. It's a great leveler. It also helped a person like Mac Miller have a #1 record last year with only 37 spins at radio. So it's attacking the historical power of radio to break music, and it's a workaround. It's a way an artist can actually get great exposure and break their career. Now radio's starting to respond to YouTube more too, so you'll see radio playing what's big on YouTube, and the TV shows are all doing that too.
Agreed.
So it's
Agreed.
Really
I think that's a very exciting branch of the tree. But before we finish our time together, Tommy, you've done so much in your career already. I wonder what a big vision is that in terms of what comes next for you. What's the one project or collaboration you've not started yet that you've dreamt about creating?
I like to look at systems that are broken and see if there's a way to fix them or recreate them by seeing them a different way.
Yep.
And that's why I started the New Music Seminar. But it's also, at the New Music Seminar, we had this closed-door legal summit that was called the New Deal Summit. We were looking at the record deal, the traditional artist label deal that's 50 years old, and these contracts are like 80 pages long, indecipherable even by lawyers, and they should have been tossed out and redone a long time ago. And now when you're moving to a non-unit-based world, 90% of the clauses that are in these contracts seem absurd.
Yeah, nobody needs breakage clauses anymore.
Nobody even needs, a 6-album guaranteed deal,
Yeah, no.
Everything's changing.
Yep.
Everything's changing, and, the contracts haven't changed. So, we looked at the 360 deals, and we looked at joint venture deals, and then I came up with this idea of how can I reduce the risk going in so I can take more shots and not be worried about it? How can I start signing artists because I like the music and not have to worry that, if I sign this one, I can't sign that one, or I have to stick with this one, and a contract that allows me to stick with an artist longer and develop them at their pace and feed music in an organic way to audiences digitally the way they're consuming music now, instead of on a way of just building an album and dropping an album and expecting radio is the only way it's going to break.
Exactly.
I looked at that market and I built a new deal around it, and I call it the Artist Freedom Deal. It's a 1-year only deal. It's the answer to the 360 deal. It's an interesting deal that only signs an artist for 1 year, and is a 50-50 split, and the artists own the masters and the videos. Because
Tommy, are you sure we're not the same person? This is a conversation I have with every artist that asks me if they should sign with a label. The very thing you just described is my model, too. We're totally separated at birth on this one.
The problem is the managers, it's in their vested interest to tell the artist to take a deal with the label because they want to get commission on that upfront money. And it's that upfront money that bonds them into indentured servitude. No label can offer a 50-50 deal and let the artist own the masters if they're also taking a huge risk on paying a big advance and funding the albums. And all the artists that I'm seeing are making their own records anyway. They're
exactly
making
what
their
I
own videos
say.
and their records.
Exactly. So this is where the model turns upside down in favor of the artist. And that's
totally
exactly. I just had this conversation Friday with the managers of this blush band that I'm telling you about. I think that as usual, you and I are very aligned on these things. And personally, I was going to ask you what you see as your legacy, but what I see as your legacy is getting this $100 billion music business back, or turning the music business into $100 billion. I think that is your legacy. I think it's your mission, and I'm here in support of it.
Well, thank you, and it's going to take more than you and me, but I'm trying to bring together
both of us have large networks, and we need to spread the word. So I say I'm behind you on this. I'm very resonant with what you're trying to create, and I'm doing my part.
Thank you, Kelly. I love you. I love everything that you're doing.
Well, thank you, and I want to thank you for fighting the good fight as you always do, and coming up with the grand visions that you do. We need that, and then creating the opportunities like the New Music Seminar to actually facilitate these new things happening.
I mean, this is a good fight, though.
And you're doing a great job with it.
Who could disagree with wanting a music business that's 4 times bigger? Not artists, not publishers, not labels, not booking agents, not tour promoters. Everybody wins.
They might be cynical about it happening, but nobody disagrees with the concept. So,
really, what my goal is to increase the world happiness level, and music does that better than anything does that.
Hallelujah.
So the world will be a better place.
What a great way to wrap up our time together. I really think that I can't top that. So thank you, Tommy. Thank you for taking to join us tonight. It's a pleasure as always. And
all right.
I hope to see you at the New Music Seminar here in a couple months. In the meantime, thank you as always to my show producer, Mary Agnes Antonopoulos, and our wonderful listeners. We'll see you all again next week at the same time for the next edition of All Access Radio. Good night, everybody.